Dashidele, Losa Dashidele, Venerable Sangye Khadro, we are so happy to welcome you back to the Days of Miracles. Thank you so much for accepting, and especially so early in Shavasti Abbey.
Not so
Um,
early.
Quite early.
It's so late there. I'm just amazed that people listen to teachings at 9 o'clock at night.
In India, we're used to being late, and it fits very nicely all the other time zones, isn't it? Then we
Yes.
can include also, the Americas. Maybe I greet everybody for the Americas. Good morning. And Europe, I think it's just afternoon. Here in India, it's 9 o'clock at night. And I think Australia, New Zealand is almost in bed already. So welcome back to the third day of the Days of Miracles. And we are so happy to welcome Venerable Sangye Khadro, who is also at Shravasti Abbey, like Venerable Thupten Schören yesterday. And we are so happy to have her telling us stories about Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So if I may introduce Venerable Sangye Khadro for the people who don't know yet. So Venerable Sangye Khadro was born in California and ordained in 1974. We were just marveling here at the office that Venerable Sangye Khadro, 50 years. This is amazing. We rejoice. 50 years. Amazing, amazing, amazing. And then took full ordination in 1988. And Venerable Sangye Khadro is maybe a little bit better known as Kathleen MacDonald, it was her lay name, writing How to Meditate. I think many of us, that was our first book we had in our hands when we started on the path. And she has completed the master program in Instituto Lama Zopa, one of our sister centers in Italy, 2013, and worked with psychologists in Israel, and of course has taught tirelessly for the last 40 years. Something like that. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're very honored to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Venerable Kunpan. So, thank you very much for inviting me to give this talk. I'm really happy to be able to connect again with Tushita Meditation Center, where I first started going in 1974. So for me, it's a little bit like a birthplace in the Dharma sense. And I'm very happy to connect with all of you in various places around the world, and to be able to give this talk during this auspicious time. So in the Tibetan tradition, it's said that the first 15 days of the lunar year is connected with some event in the life of the Buddha, where he was challenged by some other teachers, philosophers, to a show of powers. So he wasn't really into doing that, but he was the local king requested him to do that because it would be beneficial for the people. So anyway, there was this kind of competition who could create the most miracles, and the Buddha won. And so anyway, this period of time, the first 15 days, commemorates that event in the life of the Buddha. And it said that any merit, any virtue that we create during these 15 days is multiplied like 100 million times, something like that. And so it's a good time to create extra virtue, to really make an effort to do lots of virtue, and maybe even more than you normally do. And it's also the third day of Losar, the Tibetan New Year, and this is also it's so-called Chinese New Year, but it's celebrated in many Asian countries, the Lunar New Year. So I want to wish all of you a peaceful and joyous and meaningful year of the wood dragon. And so before I get into the actual talk, let's make sure we're settled down and in a good frame of mind, and have a good motivation for being here. So I invite you to sit in a comfortable position. Try to make yourself comfortable, but not too comfortable. It's not a good idea to fall asleep when meditating or listening to talks. We do want to stay awake. So it's good if you can sit up straight with your back straight. But let your body relax. Try not to hold on to tension anywhere in your body. Let your shoulders relax, your arms, your legs, your back. Let everything relax. Let any tension there may be in your body melt, flow away, disappear, leaving your as light and relaxed, free of tension as possible. Let your awareness settle down in the present moment. See if there are any thoughts running through your mind related to the past, what you were doing earlier today, or any time in the past. If there are such thoughts, put them aside for now. Let your mind, your awareness be right here in the present moment. And likewise, if there are any thoughts about the future, plans that you have for later, today, tonight, tomorrow, or any time in the future, put those aside as well. Try to give yourself a break from your usual busy thoughts, which are running to the past, to the future, to other places. Just let your mind be in the present moment, right here, wherever you are, right now, this moment. And for a few moments, be aware of the breath flowing in and out. Let the breath be natural, not forced or controlled, just a natural rhythm. And with your awareness, just follow the breath as it comes in and goes out, one breath after another. And now, see if you can open your heart as wide as possible. Get in touch with a feeling of kindness, care, compassion, the way you often feel towards your family members, your friends, your pets, little animals, little children. It's a kind of warm, caring feeling. So we can expand this feeling, increase this feeling, and have it for more and more people and other beings. See if you can do that now. See if you can understand that everyone, every being wants to be happy, to have good experiences, and to not be in pain, not suffer, not have bad experiences. So we're all the same in that way. Nobody wants suffering, everyone wants happiness. And feel how nice it would be, how wonderful it would be if everyone could be free of suffering and pain and problems and their causes, afflicted states of mind like hatred, greed, selfishness, and so on, and actions motivated by those states of mind. So wouldn't it be wonderful if everyone could be free of all of those? And wouldn't it be wonderful if everyone could be happy, have happiness, good experiences, and the causes of those, which are positive states of mind, like love, compassion, altruism, patience, and so on, and actions motivated by those. So this may seem like mere wishful thinking, but the Buddha doesn't think so. The Buddha was once an ordinary person like us and like everyone else, but he found a way to be free of all suffering and its causes and achieve happiness and its causes up to the highest happiness, the state of full enlightenment, full awakening. And he realized that everyone was capable of doing this. Everyone who has a mind can transform their minds just as he did, become totally free of all suffering and its causes, and develop all the positive qualities and perfect them. And so he taught the way to do it. And we're really fortunate that we have the chance to learn these teachings and have an interest in them, want to practice them. So as you're sitting here listening to this talk, thinking about it, maybe coming up with questions, see if you can do this with the motivation of wanting to help not only yourself, but others as well. As many other beings as possible, all beings, if you're comfortable with that. So may this talk and whatever results come from it be beneficial to all living beings and help them all get closer to their state of awakening, enlightenment. Okay. So the theme for this series of talks that was organized by Tushita is remembering the kindness of our gurus, and in particular, the two gurus, the two spiritual teachers who founded our organization, the FPMT, Lama Yeshe, who passed away on Losar 40 years ago. So it's now been 40 years since Lama Yeshe passed away. And then Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who passed away last year. And I'm sure that many of his students are still experiencing difficulties due to losing their precious spiritual teachers. And this thing about kindness, when the Tibetans talk about the kindness of our teachers or the kindness of others, they're not just talking about voluntary or intentional kindness. For example, when someone gives us a nice hot cup of tea when we're cold, or they speak comforting words to us when we're feeling lonely or sad. So of course, those are acts of kindness, but they are like deliberate, voluntary, intentional acts of kindness. But kindness can also be involuntary. Yeah. So, for example, there are people who are far away from us, maybe on the other side of the world, who grow the food that we eat and make the clothes that we wear, the shoes that we wear, and so on. And we probably never meet these people. And they're not sitting there doing their work thinking about us, thinking, oh, I'm making this T-shirt for Joe Smith living in Houston, Texas, and I hope that he will enjoy wearing this T-shirt. Okay, so they're not really thinking like that. Or the people who grow the rice that we eat, they're not thinking of us individually and I'm growing this rice for this person and that person and so on and so forth. Okay, but we benefit from the work that they do. Yeah. If they didn't do the work that they did, we wouldn't have the clothes to wear, we wouldn't have the food to eat, and so on. So the fact that we benefit from others' actions or even their states of mind, their attitudes, and so on, that's also considered kindness. Yeah. So anytime we benefit from something done by another person, that's considered kindness. And so in that sense, that gives kind of a really vast meaning to that term kindness that we don't normally recognize. And we can see that there's many ways in which others are kind to us that we may not have thought about before. And this is true also with teachers, spiritual teachers. So there are acts of deliberate voluntary kindness, for example, when they're giving us teachings or they're giving us personal advice for our practice, for our life. They're giving us gifts. They're just being nice and friendly to us and so on. So those are, deliberate acts of kindness. But their kindness extends even beyond those things. So just their way of being, just their way of acting, and the practice that they are doing and have been doing to transform their minds and free themselves from their afflictions and increase their positive qualities. So all those actions are also acts of kindness because it's beneficial for us. We benefit from them. For example, we get inspired when we observe how they behave, or we hear stories about what they have done and so on and so forth. So those are also acts of kindness. And so the kindness of teachers extends beyond their lifetime. So even when a teacher has passed away, we can still experience their kindness, by thinking of them, hearing stories about them, reading their books or listening to their teachings and so on. And also, even if you never met a particular teacher, like probably most of you didn't meet Lama Yeshe, right? He passed away 40 years ago. But even if you didn't meet him directly, you can still benefit from him by reading his books, by watching videos, by hearing stories about him, or by experiencing the benefit of the work that he did. For example, Tushita Meditation Center. Okay, so this is from the kindness of Lama Yeshe, and the whole FPMT and all the activities of the FPMT. They were all started mainly by Lama Yeshe. Yeah, his incredible compassion and dedication to the Dharma, dedication to the benefit of sentient beings. So even without meeting a teacher like Lama Tipton Yeshe, we can still benefit from his kindness. So what I thought to do for my talk is to go through a list of benefits of relying on a spiritual teacher that is contained in the book The Foundation of Buddhist Practice by the Dalai Lama and Thupten Chodron. So I don't know if you're familiar with this book. I'll say the title again, The Foundation of Buddhist Practice. So it's part of this series of books that are called collectively The Library of Wisdom and Compassion, published by Wisdom Publications. And they're now up to 9 volumes. There's still a 10th volume that'll be published later. But yeah, it's just an amazing, it's kind of a modern contemporary Lam Rim. It contains, most of the Lam Rim topics with teachings by the Dalai Lama, but also material from other traditions, the Pali tradition, the Chinese tradition, and so on. And the Dalai Lama, answers a lot of questions that contemporary people have. So anyway, this is volume 2, and it's in that volume that you find the teachings on spiritual teachers. And so within those teachings, it's actually on page 102, is the list of benefits of relying on a spiritual teacher. So I thought to go through these and illustrate them with stories of our lamas. And this list of the benefits of relying on a spiritual teacher is somewhat different than the usual list that you find in Lam Rim books. Some of the points are the same, but some are a little different. And but I think this list is quite suitable for contemporary people. So first of all, the Dalai Lama comments on this particular term for the Lam Rim topic. It's often called guru devotion, but the Tibetan term Shenyan Tenpa literally means relying on a spiritual teacher. And this term guru devotion can sometimes be problematic. It can lead people to think that it's talking about blindly surrendering to a holy authority figure, and that isn't actually the meaning of what's going on here. And so this topic, it's more appropriate to call it relying on a spiritual teacher, because Shenyan, the Tibetan term, means spiritual friend or spiritual mentor. And Tenpa means to rely on or to depend on. So for our Dharma practice to be successful, we must properly rely on a wise and compassionate spiritual mentor and guide. And so in that particular section, which is from the Lam Rim, there's advice on how to find a spiritual teacher. We need to make sure the teacher we rely on has the right qualities, someone who is reliable, not someone who's going to cheat us or mislead us. So we have to check that. And we also have to check our own qualities to make sure we have the right qualities for, to be a disciple. And then we look at the benefits. What are the positive results we will experience by doing this kind of practice of relying on a spiritual teacher. So the Dalai Lama says, before engaging in any activity, it's helpful to know the advantages of doing so and the disadvantages of not doing so or doing it improperly. So that's why it's good to look at the benefits, because then we'll be more inspired. It does take some effort, some energy to do this practice of searching for a spiritual teacher and then relating to the spiritual teacher in suitable ways. And so if we know the advantages, the benefits, the good things that we will obtain by doing this, then we'll be more inspired to put our energy into it. So the first benefit mentioned here is that our thoughts and words will become virtuous because we will follow our spiritual mentor's wise advice. So our thoughts, our words, also our actions will become more virtuous. So I think for many of us, before we actually meet spiritual teachers, we might have some ideas about what is virtue, what is not virtue, what is good, what is bad, right, wrong, and so on, due to our upbringing. Our parents taught us certain things, also in the society we grew up in. But for many of us, these ideas about good and bad, right and wrong, can sometimes be mixed with other notions that aren't necessarily so helpful. For example, the notion that, there's a creator God who created us and also gave us the commandments, these kind of rules or laws that we have to follow. And then if we don't follow them, we may get punished. Yeah, this being will punish us. And then the families we grow up in, the schools we go to, and also the society we live in tend to mirror this kind of system, of reward and punishment, good and bad, right and wrong. And this can lead us to be very fearful of doing the wrong thing. Oh, I might make a mistake, I might do the wrong thing, and then I'll get punished. And also, when we do something that's wrong, then we often feel, this unhealthy kind of shame and guilt and even, self-hatred, self-loathing, like, oh, I'm a horrible person, I'm a horrible being. And this kind of feeling can last for years, or even when, some people feel that way their whole life. They never get beyond it. Or another result may be that we become rebellious and we reject all ideas of right and wrong, good and bad, and we think, I just want to do what I feel like doing. Don't tell me what to do. I'm my own person, and I'm just going to do what I want to do. Okay, so some of us, before we meet the Dharma, we may have those kinds of experiences and those kinds of notions. And in Buddhism, one of the first things that we learn about when we start learning the Dharma is karma, the law of, sometimes called the law of cause and effect. And that's where we find these, the Buddhist notions of right and wrong and good and bad and virtue and non-virtue. But the way it's talked about in Buddhism is different. There's no creator God who created us and who set out these rules and then will punish us when we break them. So instead, karma is a natural law. It's a natural law, like the law of gravity. Or, if we eat healthy food, we'll be healthy. If we eat poisonous food or unhealthy food, we'll get sick. So this isn't because of somebody out there making us have those experiences, but it's just like a natural law. That kind of food, when it comes into our body, will have that kind of result. So karma is like that. It's a natural law. If we do good things, we'll be happy. If we do harmful things, we'll be unhappy. It's just, that's the nature of things. And yeah, and then when we learn this from our teachers in Buddhism, they also encourage us not to blindly believe. That's very much the Buddha himself, he said, don't just blindly believe what I said, but check it for yourself. Check to see if it's true. So our teachers, Lama Yeshe would always say, check it out, something like that. Yeah, encouraging us. Think about it. Check it out for yourself. Don't just blindly follow, blindly believe. And also, I remember once Lama Yeshe talking about karma and saying that, you don't have to think about rebirth, past lives, future lives. You can see the workings of karma just in one day. If you wake up in the morning in a bad mood, you're grumpy, you're unhappy about all kinds of things, and then, you go to work or you go out and do whatever you do, you're probably not going to have a very good day. You're probably going to have unpleasant experiences that day. And mainly it's because of your own state of mind. Yeah. This negative state of mind that you're in is going to color your experiences and make them unpleasant rather than pleasant. But on the other hand, sometimes we wake up and we're feeling really good, really happy, really positive. And when we go to work, we go out and do things in that state of mind, we have good experiences. So the state of mind that we have has a big effect on the kind of experiences that we have. Yeah, and we can see that for ourselves. So he said, if you look at that's like a teaching in karma. That way you can see how karma works. Oh dear, my screen just went blank. I don't know what happened. Hang on a minute. I have to do a rescue operation. Fortunately, I have another computer that I can use. That one is kind of old and decrepit. Okay, hang on a minute and I'll get that file again. Yeah, so that was really helpful, I think, for a lot of students who had difficulty believing in karma and also believing in past and future lives. So Lama Yeshe said, just check your own experience and you can see for yourself how that works, with our mind, the state of mind that we're in, that plays a big role in the kind of experiences that we have. And so when we do that, when we investigate our own experiences, check things out for ourselves, then we'll probably agree that, yeah, if I do good things, virtuous things, I'll be happier, and others will be happier too. And if I do bad things, non-virtuous things, I won't be very happy, and also others will be unhappy. So then we can see for ourselves that these things are true, and then that will motivate us to make changes in our lives and try to act with greater kindness and non-harmfulness and so on. And so that's one way in which, through the influence of our spiritual teachers, we will become more virtuous, and also just by their example, just by observing how they do things. Yeah. And I remember when I first went to India and I was living in Dharamsala and going to classes at the Tibetan library, the teacher at that time was Geshe Darge. He was the first teacher for many Western people. And I was walking around one day and I saw him taking a walk. And I noticed that he stopped at one point and picked up a little insect, like a worm or something that was in the path. And he just picked it up very gently and he put it on the side in the grass. And I was just like blown away. I'd never seen anybody do anything like that. And he was like an important Lama. Everybody respected him and bowed to him when he came in to teach classes and so on. And I thought, wow, you know, he's humble enough to pick up a little worm and save its life. That was just mind-boggling and really inspiring for me. You know, I always cared about animals and didn't want to harm animals, but I didn't extend that to bugs. You know, I didn't sort of see them as beings that were worthy of care and so on. So that, yeah, that really inspired me. So that's just one example, but yeah, I'm sure we all have examples of that where we observe a teacher, a spiritual teacher, and how they treat other people and other beings, how they behave and so on. And that can inspire us to try to be more virtuous ourselves. And then we'll have more happiness, right? If we're more virtuous, we'll be happier and we'll make others happier. And then the second benefit mentioned in this book is similar, but the opposite. He says, for the same reason, we won't bring suffering on ourselves or others. So through meeting spiritual teachers and learning from them and observing their example, we'll create more virtue. We'll also refrain from non-virtue. So non-virtue, so in Buddhism, they actually have an explanation of what is virtue and what is non-virtue. And it's virtue is what brings happiness. It's the source of happiness, the cause of happiness. And it mainly refers to positive states of mind, like compassion and faith and so on. So there's certain mental factors that bring happiness, and also actions, the karma that we create under the influence of those virtuous mental states. So that's what virtue is. And then non-virtue is the opposite. Non-virtue is what brings suffering, problems, unhappiness. And that, again, mainly refers to certain mental states like anger, hatred, strong greed, craving. So those mental states bring unhappiness. We can see that for ourselves if we watch our mind. And also the actions we do, the karma we create under their influence. It becomes non-virtue. So that's really helpful to have an actual definition of virtue and non-virtue rather than it being just arbitrary, someone else's idea, someone else's notion of, you know, what they think is virtue or non-virtue. And again, we're encouraged to investigate that for ourselves. So before we meet our teachers, you know, in the earlier part of our life especially, you know, we probably did things that were non-virtuous, that were destructive, negative, causing suffering for ourselves and for others, and not really knowing what we were doing. You know, we were just acting kind of in a confused state. We just have these delusions or these afflictive emotions coming up in our mind, kind of like a volcanic eruption, and we had no choice over what was going on in our mind. We just get totally, you know, carried away with these afflicted mental states and then do things, you know, act out of those delusions and then do things that were harmful for others, harmful for ourselves, and so on. And we may have felt some, you know, may have felt bad and guilty and ashamed, but we didn't know what to do, how to change this. So again, when we learn the Dharma, one of the first things our teachers teach us is, you know, about karma, and in particular the 10 non-virtuous actions that were taught by the Buddha. So those are the main acts that are non-virtuous that we should try to avoid if we don't want to suffer. So killing and stealing and so on and so forth. And so if we again check this out and we feel, yeah, that makes sense, that seems true, then we can, try our best to refrain from those actions. And in that way, our life goes in a different direction. We're less likely to do things that are harmful and destructive and cause suffering for ourselves as well as for others. And yeah, so related to our lamas, when I read the books, there's the biography of Lama Zopa Rinpoche called Laudo Lama that came out quite a few years ago, and then Big Love, the biography of Lama Yeshe. So for me, reading those books was kind of an eye-opener, because when I first arrived at Kopan, it was the beginning of 1974. And at that time, there was already a group of Western monks and nuns who had just recently been ordained, and they were living together, keeping vows, and having a daily schedule, doing practice, and so on and so forth. And the discipline at Kopan was quite good, pretty good. Yeah, people were living well, behaving themselves. And so when I read these biographies of Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I was really quite surprised to find out some of, what had happened before 1974, when the Lamas first started meeting Western students and teaching them and so on. So at Kopan even, there were like parties with drugs and alcohol and music, and yeah. And, lamas were living right there in one room, and next door there was this wild party going on. And so that helped me appreciate how skillful and compassionate our lamas were. They didn't try to immediately make all their students behave well, but they would teach them the Dharma and just be very kind and patient. And then gradually, as time went on, the students became more and more interested in, settling down and living a more virtuous life, and taking precepts and actually becoming monks and nuns. So another example of their incredible kindness. And I was really shocked. I think it was in the book Laudo Lama. There was one incident. The Lama's first student was Zina. I didn't have a chance to meet her, but she was sounded like quite a character. And there was one incident where she was bringing them breakfast on a tray. She walked into their room with this tray full of food for their breakfast, and she was upset about something. I don't remember if that was mentioned in the story, but she just kind of threw this tray of food at the lamas. And I was like, wow, that's certainly not how you behave with your spiritual teachers. But it seems like the lamas weren't angry or upset or anything. They just kind of, yeah, practiced patience and continued being very kind and compassionate towards her. Okay, so then the next benefit mentioned in this book is, so again, these are benefits of relying on spiritual teachers. The next one is, we will complete the 2 collections of merit and wisdom and attain full awakening by following reliable teachings. So this is talking about, this mentions these 2 collections, merit and wisdom. So those are the 2 most important practices we need to do in order to attain enlightenment, to actualize our potential for enlightenment, our Buddha nature. So merit, sometimes called method, that involves generating bodhicitta, this loving, compassionate attitude towards all living beings, wanting to become enlightened for their benefit, and also practicing the 6 perfections, generosity, ethics, patience, and so on. So that's the method side of the path, the merit side of the path. And then the other side of the path is wisdom. And that means developing the understanding of emptiness and eventually getting the actual realization of emptiness, the true nature of all things. So before we meet our teachers, we probably have no clue that there's even such a thing as enlightenment, as Buddhahood, and that this is something we ourselves can attain, much less knowing how to do that. Okay, even if we hear about enlightenment and we think, yeah, I want to do that, but how? What do we have to do to reach enlightenment? And so, when we meet our teachers, then they reveal that to us. And Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche were among the first Tibetan lamas to start teaching non-Tibetans. So that became really clear when I read the book Big Love, the kind of background of how they started teaching, Western students. And there weren't many Tibetan lamas. Most Tibetan monks, lamas, and so on were simply trying to rebuild their own lives, their monasteries, continue their studies and their practice and so on. But not many were actually teaching outsiders like Western people. And Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche were really unique in that way. And so just amazing how kind they were to sort of reveal to us these precious teachings that have been preserved in Tibet for so many centuries and practiced in Tibet. And many Tibetans were able to reach enlightenment through following these teachings. So to open up to us and share these teachings with us was incredibly precious. And also the way that they taught us, they emphasized practice more than intellectual knowledge. So they again and again mentioned how important it was to meditate on the teachings and not just take them in an intellectual way, acquiring knowledge like when you're in university. And so they developed these courses at Kopan Monastery that always include a balance of learning, like there's always a Dharma teaching, then there's discussion, question and answer, so people can ask questions, clear up their doubts, and then meditation, meditating on what we learn, and also living ethically, living, according to the Dharma, like keeping the 5 precepts, and sometimes, on certain days taking the 8 Mahayana precepts. It's a stronger kind of practice of ethics. So very different. The way the lamas would teach us was very different from learning Buddhism in an academic setting. So some people go to university, and get a PhD in Buddhism, but maybe they never learn how to actually put into practice what they have learned. It's easy to do that. So I think we're very fortunate that our lamas had a different approach, and that approach that started at Kopan Monastery and then later spread to Tushita, and then their other centers as they developed around the world became a kind of FPMT style of doing things. But it's not exclusive to FPMT. I mean, many Dharma centers around the world also have a similar kind of approach. And then also their teachings, the way they taught us, included both of these aspects of method and wisdom. And those, you've probably heard this analogy that they are like the 2 wings of a bird. Just as a bird can only fly if it has both wings, can't fly with only one or no wings. So to be able to fly, a bird needs 2 wings. In a similar way, for a practitioner to ascend to enlightenment, it's necessary to have those 2 wings of method and wisdom. And so the lamas made sure that we got teachings on both of those aspects. and they were very skillful in the way that they taught things and explained things. I remember one time after I left India, I was living in England, and Lama Yeshe came at one point and gave a public talk in London. And during that talk, he said something that really struck me and really stayed in my mind. He was talking about bodhicitta. And at one point he said, bodhicitta is just, like how we are with another person. I don't remember the exact words, but just like relating, he said, relating to another person in a warm and caring and friendly way. That's bodhicitta. And I was like, wow. Because, for years I'd been hearing how bodhicitta is this huge thing where you have to think about all sentient beings everywhere in the universe and develop love for them and compassion for them, and then take on this responsibility. I'm going to become a Buddha to help all of those sentient beings. So it just seemed like, I mean, I loved the idea. I wanted to do that, but it just seemed so big and difficult beyond my ability. And so what Lama Yeshe said at that point just kind of brought it down to earth and something very practical, something I could get a hold of. Yeah, it's just learning how to be a kind and caring person with the people in front of you and around you. So for me, that was very, very, very helpful. And that was one of his incredible talents or skills, that he took these amazing teachings, which can seem huge and overwhelming and difficult, and make them very practical and accessible. Okay, the next benefit mentioned in the book is we will be able to work for the benefit of sentient beings, including those who have entered wrong paths. So, yeah. So by learning from our spiritual teachers, we ourselves will learn how to help others, other sentient beings, including those who have entered wrong paths, meaning those who are kind of going in the wrong direction with their lives. And again, in the early days, when the Lamas first started teaching Westerners, the students who were coming to them were hippies. And I didn't kind of realize the sort of uniqueness of that until that time when I was living in England. I was living at Manjushri Institute, and we started this program called the Geshe Studies Program. So it was studying the same kind of texts that are studied in the monasteries where the Geshes study and become Geshes. And as our teacher, we had Khenso Jampa Tekchok, although at that time he was called Geshe Jampa Tekchok. And so I think he was a classmate of Lama Yeshe, and so Lama Yeshe asked him to, come and teach in the center in England. And after being so I was one of the first students enrolled in this Geshe Studies program. And we were just kind of a small group of students. And at one point he told us during class, he said, when I was living in India, I used to see these Western people walking around, and I thought, they're hopeless. They could never learn the Dharma. So they were probably hippies, back in the 60s and 70s. The Western people who were in India were mostly hippies. You didn't have sort of nice, well-dressed tourists. So they were hippies with raggedy clothes and long hair and probably looking quite spaced out. So Geshe Tekchok told us, he looked at these people and he thought, oh, they would never be able to learn the Dharma. So he was actually quite reluctant to come to England and teach Western people. But I guess Lama Yeshe, really encouraged him. So finally he agreed. And then after coming and starting to teach us, he said he was pleasantly surprised to find out that we weren't hopeless, that Western people, or at least some of us, we're intelligent and interested in learning the Dharma, and we asked good questions. I was actually pleasantly pleased, surprised that, the experience of teaching Westerners was quite different than what he had thought it would be. But yeah, then looking at how Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, right from the beginning, they didn't think that Western people were kind of hopeless and, oh no, I don't want to waste my time on them. They accepted to start teaching these Western hippies that they met in India, and were really dedicated to that. They didn't want to go back to their monasteries. They didn't want to continue their life in the Tibetan monasteries and communities. They wanted to stay with Westerners. So as a result of that, as a result of this kind of vision that they had and this dedication that they had to teaching Western people, then we all of us and so many other thousands of students have had the chance to learn the teachings from them. So that's kind of an illustration of this idea that, yeah, the example of our teachers, even though, their first students were kind of, I don't know, had interesting ideas and lifestyle and so on, but some interest in the Dharma. And so they, dedicated themselves to teaching us. And so having them as our teachers and role models and examples to follow, then when it comes time for ourselves to teach others or share the Dharma, not everybody wants to be a teacher, not everybody will become a teacher, but we often have opportunities to share the Dharma. If we have family members or friends who are interested, show an interest in learning the Dharma, or your doctor or your lawyer or whatever, they find out that you're meditating and show an interest, then you can share something with them. And so, based on the example of our precious teachers, Lama Yeshe Lama Zopa Rinpoche, then we won't reject anyone. We won't think anybody is kind of hopeless, a lost cause, but we'll be willing to do what we can to help them. Okay, then next of the benefits mentioned here is because our spiritual mentor teaches us how to purify our negativities, we will exhaust destructive karma that would have ripened in lengthy, unfortunate rebirths. It may instead ripen in this life as comparatively mild discomfort or harm. So I don't know if you've encountered this idea before, but it's said in the teachings that once we start to learn the Dharma and practice the Dharma, and in particular, do purification practice. Let me just fix that fuzziness. It happens sometimes. We may encounter unpleasant experiences, problems, difficulties, sickness, accidents, and so on. And as a Dharma practitioner, the ideal way of viewing these problems is that it's our karma from the past that is ripening. So as you probably heard, we've had many lives before this one. And in our previous lives, we weren't always positive and virtuous, but we were often non-virtuous. We did a lot of negative things. In fact, they say we probably did every possible negative action that there is. And so we're still carrying the karma from those negative actions. And if that karma isn't purified, then it could be the cause for us to have unfortunate rebirths and unfortunate experiences. And so we kind of have this big load of bad karma from past lives. And through the practice of Dharma, that bad karma, which could bring really awful experiences, can ripen in the form of relatively small problems that can occur in our life, like getting a headache. Having a headache might be the karma to have a whole rebirth in an unfortunate situation where there'd be a lot of suffering. And instead of that, we get a headache. Okay. So it's like that karma ripens in a much lighter form than it would otherwise. And so that's something to be happy about. So instead of complaining and feeling sorry for ourselves for having a headache, we can think, oh, this is a good thing. This means that karma is finishing, that karma is disappearing, and I won't have to have that awful experience in an unfortunate situation. So that's the ideal way of thinking when we have problems. And not even previous lives, but even in this lifetime, there may have been things that we did that were quite negative. And some people may have been in the military and may have killed people. Or may have been a fisherman or a hunter, and actually killed other people, other beings. So there may be heavy karma that was created in the earlier part of this life, and through the practice of Dharma, that karma may ripen in the form of some other kind of problem. So instead of feeling unhappy about that, we can feel this is a good thing. This is what the Tibetans thought, with the Chinese taking over their country and having to leave their homes, or in some cases being put into prison and having really horrific experiences in prison. So what they would think was, this is my karma. I created bad karma in past lives, and now it's ripening, and it's good that it's ripening. It's like paying off debts. And that way, that debt is finished. I don't have that hanging over me anymore. So in that way, they would be more accepting of what was happening and not angry and not feel, oh, this isn't right, this isn't fair, this is unjust. So our lamas really did teach us about purification, about karma and purification, and it was shortly after I got ordained in 1974 at Kopan that Lama Yeshe first taught the practice of Vajrasattva and had all his students do a Vajrasattva retreat. So that was summer of 1974. The first 3-month Vajrasattva retreat happened at Kopan. And some people stayed there and did the retreat. Other people went up in the mountains and did on their own. But that became, I think from that time on, it was a yearly event, a yearly group Vajrasattva retreat at Kopan Monastery, and later at Tushita and other centers as well, offering this kind of retreat where people could do the Vajrasattva practice, 100,000 mantras, and purify, a lot of the karma they created in the earlier part of their life or in past lives as well. So they really did encourage us to do the practice of purification. And also, I think it was in 1974 at the 7th meditation course that Lama Zopa Rinpoche first taught us the practice of the 35 Buddhas, where we recite the names and do prostrations to the 35 Buddhas. And that's also a very beneficial practice of purification, and that has become a standard practice in the FPMT centers. And so knowing about karma, knowing how to purify karma is very, very important. And also this notion that, problems that we experience during our life, in our practice of Dharma, in our relationship with our teacher, and so on and so forth, that this is a one way that karma gets purified. That's really helpful to know, because I think there are some people who learn the Dharma and start practicing the Dharma, and they may have this expectation that, oh, now I'm doing something really good, I'm doing something really positive and virtuous with my life, so everything should go well. Yeah, from now on, there shouldn't be any more problems, any more difficulties. I should have nothing but good experiences. Well, because I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing Dharma, and that's good. So only good things should happen. So I think people sometimes have that expectation. And so, well, it's not like that, right? You have some good experiences, but you still have problems. So problems still happen to us. Bad things still happen to us, even after we embark on a spiritual path. And it's important to know that that's normal. And it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad sign. It doesn't mean you're doing something wrong, because otherwise people might think, oh, maybe Dharma doesn't work. So maybe I'm on the wrong path. I should give this up and do something else. That's possible. I don't know if anyone actually does that or not, but they can, get quite disillusioned and discouraged with the Dharma if everything doesn't go smoothly for them. So the teachers remind us again and again, no, you just got a lot of karma, a lot of bad karma that you created in past lives. And it's going to take a while for that to get purified. So when bad things happen, don't be surprised. And it's actually good. Your bad karma is coming out in ways that would, are easier to bear than otherwise. Okay, the next one is, due to the important role our spiritual mentors play in our lives, we will create great merit, more than is created by making offerings to limitless Buddhas. So it's said that the teachers, our spiritual teachers or gurus, whatever you want to call them, they are the most powerful objects for creating merit or virtue. And so doing something like making an offering a cookie, for example, giving a cookie to your teacher compared to giving a cookie to a little kid, there's much more merit, much more merit or virtue or good karma, just because, as it says here, that the role that the teacher plays in your life is really important, because they're teaching you the Dharma, they're helping you get on the path to enlightenment, or benefiting you in so many ways. And so because of the vast benefit we receive from our teachers, any virtue we create, any good things we do in relation to our teachers will be, will enable us to create a lot of merit. And so again, this is the kindness of our teachers, having met them and became disciples, students of them, having a relationship with them, then we had opportunities to create a lot of merit by listening to their teachings, making offerings to them, even a cookie, even a flower, a candle, even something small like that. When it's offered to a teacher with respect and devotion, then we can create a huge amount of merit. And also, the lamas gave us plenty of opportunity to create merit by working for them. So one of the ways of relying on a spiritual teacher is offering service, saying, is there something I can do to help? Yes. They set up all these different projects, different centers, and then they would ask students to help with them, and they needed help. So whether working as a center director or a spiritual program coordinator, or just writing letters or writing, making books and so on and so forth. So being asked by our teachers to do these kind of jobs is a way for us to create a vast amount of merit. And sometimes people found themselves doing things they'd never dreamed of doing on their own. That's certainly my case. I mean, I never thought to become a teacher. I was always incredibly shy and also lacking in self-confidence of getting up in front of a group of people and talking was just like terrifying for me. But I was kind of pushed into this role by my teachers, Lama Yeshe Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And initially it was really, really hard for me, but I came to enjoy it. I found it really beneficial for myself, because when you have to teach something to others, you have to know it really well yourself. So you learn a lot by being a teacher. So it's been really helpful for me. And then, of course, because you're doing what your teacher asks you to do, then you're creating a lot of merit. Okay, so then next benefit, by properly relying on our spiritual mentors in this life, we will meet qualified spiritual mentors in future lives. So this one is really important. This is one of the main benefits of having a good relationship with a spiritual teacher in this life. We're creating the causes that in our next life and lives, we will again be able to meet spiritual teachers and have healthy relationships with them. And if you think about, well, okay, this life we meet spiritual teachers and we value them and we value the Dharma and so on. But imagine being born in a situation where you're not able to find spiritual teachers. Even if you try, you can't find any. Maybe they're not around. There's nobody around who's teaching the Dharma. And you may go your entire life without ever meeting spiritual teachers and having that opportunity of learning from their words, from their example, and so on and so forth. How terrible that would be. And so to ensure that in next life and subsequent lives, we will continue meeting spiritual teachers and having the ideal conditions to continue practicing what they teach and so on, we need to create the causes now. The way to create those causes is by having a healthy relationship with our spiritual teachers now. That means appreciating them, respecting them, really trying to practice what they teach and so on, as opposed to being angry at them and full of criticism and finding faults and rejecting them and saying, oh, I'm not going to do what they tell me to do. So if we have those kind of attitudes, that's not conducive for being able to meet with spiritual teachers and have good conditions to continue practicing in future lives. Okay, the next benefit, our good qualities will increase and we will accomplish the welfare of ourselves and others. So I think that's kind of understandable because our teachers embody good qualities. They embody kindness, compassion, love, patience, ethics, and of course wisdom, all the good qualities that can be developed. They have them in their personality, in their way of being, way of living, and so on. And so again, just by being around them, observing how they do things, we become more like that ourselves because of our mirror neurons, but also because listening to their teachings and trying to put into practice what they're teaching us, then we're able to develop those same good qualities. And by having those good qualities in ourselves, we ourselves will be happier, we'll be going in the direction of enlightenment, and we'll be able to help others more. And when I think about this one, I really feel immense gratitude to Lama Yeshe in particular, because because of various experiences in my life, when I first started learning the Dharma, I had a really hard time feeling love. It was almost like my heart was frozen. I wasn't able to actually feel love. And over the years, Lama Yeshe was such a loving person and really, with me, I mean, with everybody, but I just really felt he showed me a lot of love. He probably could see where I was at and what I needed. And slowly, it took me a while. At first, I was kind of, is this guy for real? It was kind of hard to believe that somebody could be so loving to everybody. But as time went on and seeing more and more evidence of that, then yeah, it's like my heart melted. That ice that was around my heart melted, and I was able to feel it myself, which is such a relief. I know other people have this problem too. It's just really hard for them to feel love. And I know firsthand what that's like and how awful it is and how difficult it is to have healthy relationships if you can't really love. And yeah, so I'm incredibly grateful to Lama Yeshe for doing that, teaching me how to love. And I remember one incident, must have been in the first couple of years when I was at Kopan, and I was standing with Lama Yeshe on the steps of the Gompa at Kopan Monastery. And I think I was telling him about some problem that I was having, and I really need help, Lama, and da, 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 da. And just then a taxi came, and this young man arrived, and I think he had come to another Kopan course, in a previous year and gone back home, and now he was arriving again. And he started walking up the steps, and Lama Yeshe, as soon as he saw him, he was just like, oh, so happy to see this person enjoying so much attention and joy and da 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 da. And for me, that was kind of astounding because I found that particular young man quite annoying. I had a very judgmental attitude. I thought he was kind of arrogant and materialistic. And yeah, I saw things in him that I didn't like. So I certainly didn't feel happy seeing him come back to Kopan. But yeah, just seeing Lama's genuine joy and love and kindness for this young man was really was a real teaching for me. And that was how he was with me too. When I first arrived at Kopan, I kind of wandered up the hill and I didn't really know where I was going, what I was doing. And, I saw a few other people and they just kind of ignored me. But then as soon as Lama saw me, he was like, oh, welcome. So happy you're here. It's like, huh? So that's how he was. He was just a really, really, really loving, caring person. And yeah, having all those good qualities helps us develop them as well. Okay, just one more of these benefits of relying on a spiritual teacher. It says, under our teacher's compassionate guidance, we will feel supported and inspired in our practice. So what I think about with this one is that, yeah, it's not easy to practice Dharma. If it was easy, everybody in the world would be doing it, but that's obviously not the case. It's not easy, it's hard, it's tough. And so there are always times when we find ourselves feeling maybe discouraged. Oh, this is so hard, and I feel like I'm not getting anywhere. Or we face problems in our meditation and we don't know how to deal with them. And so having a spiritual teacher, if you have a relationship with a spiritual teacher, you can go and talk to them or write to them if they're far away. And yeah, usually you get an answer, you get a chance to, hear their advice. And yeah, so they give very good, very helpful advice that can help us work out this problem we're stuck with, or just give us encouragement, to keep going and not give up. Yeah. So, and sometimes just thinking of them, even without having to talk to them or write to them, if we just bring them to mind and think about how they are and how they've lived their lives and how they've practiced and what they've taught us. So just that alone might be enough to give us the energy we need to continue going in our practice. So yeah, this feeling of being supported and inspired in our practice. Okay, so then the conclusion of these benefits, the Dalai Lama says, all of the benefits come about because we listen with an open mind to teachings from a qualified spiritual mentor and put them into practice. So these benefits that you can get from relying on a spiritual teacher aren't something magic, yeah? They don't come about without any causes and conditions. So it's a two-way thing. Our teachers are there with all these incredible qualities and love and kindness and the desire to help. So that's kind of there all the time. But we, from our side, need to open our hearts to them, listen to their teachings, practice to the best of our ability, sincerely, and so on. So, depending on those conditions, yeah, so something from our side, something does have to come from our side for us to be able to experience these benefits. Or at least try it out, like the Buddha said, and the Lamas always say, check it out for yourself, see if it's true. Don't just blindly believe, but give it a try. Investigate and see if it's true, see if it makes sense, see if it works for you. Okay, so that's been kind of a lot of talk, and I did want to leave some time if anybody has a question. We do have a little bit of time left. If anyone would like to ask a question. You can use the little button to raise your hand.
Oh, let's see. Hello? Hello?
I hear a voice.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. The camera was off. There we go.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah,
Thank you,
yeah.
first and foremost. Wow, it's so inspiring to see the love in this talk and everything, and how far you seem to have been taken with your Dharma practice. That's certainly. I'm also about to do my first 3 month at Kopan. Was wondering, it was really cool to hear your story with the Westerners' first encounters with Tibetan Buddhism. And I was wondering, did you find any Westerners who ended up becoming very, realized practitioners as well? Like Westerners maybe coming in their mid-20s, say, that ended up kind of really taking in the teachings and kind of like walking the path all the way. Are there examples of those as well? Thank
You
you.
mean getting enlightened?
Thank you. Yes.
Um, well, it's difficult to answer that because, for one thing, it's hard to know where somebody else is at unless you have a high degree of realization yourself and clairvoyance. You can't really see into somebody else's mind and know whether they have realizations or not. And it's also not correct in Buddhism, especially for monastics, monks and nuns. We're not supposed to talk about realizations, or even if you do have some realization, it isn't that you put it on your Facebook page and so on. You're supposed to keep quiet and just talk with your teachers, maybe a few Dharma friends, but not just publicly announce it. So it's difficult. I'm not in any position to say if somebody else has reached enlightenment, but also, even though the teachings do say, especially the tantric teachings, they say it is possible to attain enlightenment in one lifetime. However, the Dalai Lama has said that this is actually very, very rare. I heard him once say maybe 1 in a million will be able to do that. And he even said it's kind of like propaganda, that kind of statement. So he doesn't, yeah, he doesn't sort of emphasize that idea of attaining enlightenment in one lifetime. And in fact, just the opposite. He said it's better to think long term. It's better to think, even if it takes many, many lifetimes to reach enlightenment, I will continue practicing and not give up and, yeah, eventually get there. So, yeah, I can't really think of anyone that I know, any Westerner who's, I mean, some people do sometimes claim that they've attained realizations, but I tend to be skeptical of that. Yeah, because again, I think if someone really did have a realization, they probably wouldn't talk about it publicly. Yeah, so when people do talk publicly, then I think, and there's a couple of people I know who thought they had realizations, they had some experience and they thought, oh, this is the realization of emptiness, or this is the path of seeing, or whatever. And they go to see a Lama and the Lama says, no. So that can happen. You can have some experience that you mistakenly believe to be a realization, but turns out that it's not. So it is always good to check with a teacher rather than just come to your own conclusion and think, oh, now I'm enlightened. Probably not. Yeah, check with a teacher.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
But the Dalai Lama, in the last couple of years, especially, almost every time he teaches, he talks about some experiences that he's had. He says he's realized bodhicitta. No, he says, what does he say? He's realized emptiness. He has had a realization of emptiness, and he has bodhicitta, but he's not yet at the path of preparation. This is the second of the 5 paths. So he's quite open about that, and I think it's to give people encouragement, to people he says, if you keep practicing, he says, I've worked really hard. I get up every morning and meditate on bodhicitta, meditate on emptiness. So he's kind of saying, if you practice, you will get these experiences too. You will get these realizations too. So it's kind of very encouraging and inspiring. Wangmo?
Hi, Venerable. Thank you very much for these teachings. My question's sort of 2-part. I was just thinking, what exactly is the definition of a realization, and can realizations happen like off the cushion, or is it just when in meditative equipoise, or could it happen during a teaching or in daily living while reflecting deeply on the concepts?
I don't know if there's, I mean, in some cases there are criteria for certain realizations, like for example, the direct realization of emptiness. When you have the direct realization of emptiness, there's certain experiences that accompany that, like if your mind absorbs into emptiness like water into water, and you have no sense of duality, subject-object duality. But prior to that, you have an inferential or conceptual realization of emptiness, and that also has certain criteria to know if you've achieved that or not. So with some realizations, there is an explanation of criteria to know if you've got that realization or not. And I've heard, they can happen off the cushion. I think I heard a story about somebody who was chopping wood, and while chopping wood, they had a realization. But that only happened, I think, because they had been studying and they had been meditating and so on. So it's just outside of meditation, because of all the work they did during meditation, the realization can happen. But, I think there's like different types of realization, different levels. So you can have little flashes, little insights into things when you're meditating or reading something or whatever. Then you need to nurture those experiences, familiarize with them again and again and again so that they become more solid, more stable, more part of your normal way of thinking and doing things and so on. Yeah, actually, the Dalai Lama, he talks about an experience of emptiness that he had. He was reading a text. I think it was a text by Buddha Palita on emptiness. Was it Buddha Palita? Anyway, it was a text about emptiness. And it was particularly talking about the emptiness of the self. And he said while he was reading that, he had this experience. He said it was like being struck by lightning. It was just like, a bolt of lightning hitting him. His self, the self, the I kind of disappeared. He said it was really quite strong and difficult even. So yeah, realizing emptiness isn't necessarily something blissful and wonderful. It could be like, wow, like you're feeling the ground has disappeared under you. You've been turned upside down, and it's like everything you ever thought was true, now you see isn't true. So it can be quite, challenging, but good. Yeah, this is what we need. We need to be shaken up, not believe things as solid as they normally appear. So what do you think, Venerable Kunpan?
There is one lady waiting, or maybe a gentleman there is one question in the chat, if we still have a minute, Venerable. What do you think?
Yeah.
How do we work with the guilt and self-blame about things we've done before we met the Dharma? What to do with these difficult emotions which come up after purification practices as well?
Okay, yeah, this is really important. Guilt seems to be a very common experience among Western people, but I think other cultures as well. Tibetans don't seem to have a problem. Apparently, they don't even have a word for guilt. So I don't think they experience that. So it's good to feel regret. Part of the process of purification for opponent powers is to feel regret, but regret and guilt are not the same. The way I see it is regret is kind of intelligent and rational, and especially if you know about karma and you look, when I was 10 years old, I did such and such, and I realize now that was really wrong. I really feel bad that I did that. I wish I hadn't done that, and I want to purify it. So it's positive and constructive because it leads you to do some constructive things. Do purification, maybe apologize or make up for whatever it was you did. And so it leads to constructive action. And then, and also it involves a sense of what's the word? Of hopefulness, like I can change. I did that bad thing, but I know that's not me. It's not permanent. I don't have to keep doing that thing. I can stop doing that thing and change and never do it again. So you have a sort of sense of confidence in yourself and hopefulness, optimism. Yeah, that's involved with regret. Whereas guilt tends to be very emotional and very deprecating. Oh, I'm so bad, I'm so horrible. And maybe also a sense that, oh, I can never change. I'm going to be like this forever. This is how I am. I'm just this bad person permanently for all of time. So if you look at guilt and what it's saying, the narrative, then you might notice things like that. You know, I'm just so bad and I can never be different than I am. So it's kind of very, yeah, self-defeating, self-deprecating, pessimistic. So it's good to look at what is going on in the mind, what kind of thoughts there are, and recognize those that are not helpful and not true. Because Buddhism says no matter what we do, even if, you know, like there's stories of Milarepa or Angulimala at the time of the Buddha who killed 999 people. You know, he was like a serial killer. And then he met the Buddha and he totally turned around and became an arhat, you know, attained nirvana in that same lifetime. So we need to believe that it's possible. No matter what we do, whatever negative things we may have done, they can be purified and we can change ourselves. We can transform ourselves and even become fully enlightened. So those are, you know, maybe hard to believe that, but it's good to look at those stories and think, well, they did it. You know, Milarepa did black magic and killed a bunch of people, and he turned himself around and became enlightened in that lifetime. So they were able to purify what they did, and I can too. You know, so we need to encourage ourselves and believe that, you know, we can change and put our energy into that. Because guilt, you can just get stuck in that. And it's not productive, it's not constructive, and yeah, it's not a happy state of mind. So forgiveness, yeah, that's another important thing. Learning to forgive yourself. And if you can learn to forgive yourself, then it's easier to forgive others as well. So look into material about forgiveness and work on that. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you so much, Venerable Sangye Khadro, for these very positive, wonderful teachings for the new year. Thank you so much.
Okay, so let's just finish by dedicating the merit, the positive energy we have created. We started with a positive motivation, wanting to benefit other beings as much as possible, and then listening and thinking about and generating positive thoughts in relation to this talk. So let's dedicate all this good energy that we've created to all sentient beings. May it help them all be free of suffering and its causes and achieve happiness and its causes, all the way up to the highest happiness of full enlightenment, awakening, Buddhahood. And may this merit also be the cause for spiritual teachers, especially His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and all other teachers still alive. May they live as long as possible, always be in good health, and continue sharing the Dharma with us. And those teachers who passed away, especially precious Lama Zopa Rinpoche, may they return as quickly as possible and continue their work of teaching and guiding us sentient beings. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Venerable Sangye Khadro, for being with us again in the new year. It was really so inspiring, so positive. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And please, I don't know, Venerable Sangye Khadro, if you come to Asia again, please come back soon.
I would love to. It's just kind of a long way.
I know.
Try to make it happen. Yeah.
Thank you.
Very. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
See you very soon again. Bye bye. have a good day, and everybody on Zoom, have a good day if you're in the Americas, or a good afternoon, or a good night if you're in India, especially. Thank you so much. And tomorrow we continue the Days of Miracles. At 7 o'clock, I think we move a little bit back with Paula Chichester, also sharing stories about Lama Yeshe Lama Zopa Rinpoche, still, on that same theme. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much, Venerable Sangye Khadro.
Take care. Bye
Have a
bye.
good day.